Hey everybody, this is Craig Egan on the Pro-Vaccine World Tour. I am at Children's Minnesota.
Yes.
And we are with Patsy Stinchfield.
You got it.
I've got it, yes. And Joe Kurland.
Yes, sir.
And just tell me what you guys do here.
So I'm Patsy Stinchfield. I'm an infectious disease nurse practitioner. I've been here 30 years, taking care of sick kids. And I'm also the Senior Director of Infection Prevention and Control. So we try to prevent disease, but when disease erupts, we control it.
Wonderful. And
I'm an infection preventionist working with Patsy or for Patsy at Children's here. My primary role is for the ambulatory clinics, but I'm also a vaccine specialist for the clinic system as well, where I answer questions that clinicians and families have about immunizations and schedules. And actually we also offer recommendations and guidance to partners outside of the children's system if they call and ask questions too.
Awesome. Awesome. So you save kids.
Okay, yes. We do our best. Yes, we do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you guys know my name's Craig. I'm touring the country protesting anti-vaxxers. So I'm really glad to have you guys. A lot of people are, supporting what I'm doing, but you guys are the real heroes. So I just want to make sure, because I don't have a degree in anything. So I appreciate you guys taking your time with me. So
we just want to say we appreciate you taking your time to be the voice out there for the majority of parents, the majority of healthcare professionals, vast majority, over 95% of parents vaccinate on time. They know vaccines save lives, but they're busy. We're here working, parents are taking care of their kids. It seems so normal that they don't have time to go out and do what you're doing, so thank you to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. It's one of those things where it's a minority, but it's a vocal minority, the anti-vax groups. And so it's easy to forget that the world is mostly sane.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys have dealt with the measles outbreak
We have.
recently here. What was that? What was that ordeal like?
So it started early April, and we knew with our first case that we were going to have an emergency. And the reason we knew that was our vaccine rates in certain populations in Minnesota, particularly young Somali children, had really plummeted over a decade. And we thought that this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a measles outbreak will spread in the community, because there's lots of international travel back and forth. And so, in measles being endemic in Somalia, someone getting it exposed there, bringing it back to a community with a 42% MMR vaccination rate, it'll go like a match on Tinder. So when case 1 came in early April, we just went into our what we call HICS, the Hospital Emergency or Incident Command System. We went into emergency response mode.
And so we got together an entire team from multiple different departments, including the infection control department, infectious disease doctors. We got our ambulatory division, the emergency team, all kind of at the table talking and planning for how we're going to respond to this, and not only care for the children that had measles in the community and are coming into care, receive care, but how are we going to protect other kids from getting sick in the hospital? It's one of the most contagious diseases out there, and it can survive in the air for up to 2 hours.
Right.
So how do you go about minimizing the risk of exposing other people after they come into the clinic or hospital or ER? And then following up with individuals, identifying quickly who all may have already been exposed by these kiddos that came into the hospital, getting them treatment, and you have a very limited window as far as when you can get them medicine or treatment and therapy before they would go on to progress and have to be in quarantine or isolation or progress to disease. And it's, like Patsy said, we started this in mid-April. We basically hit the ground running, because after you get the test results that are positive, you're already a couple of days behind on when you can actually start treating the people that were exposed.
Right. And so this whole outbreak was predictable and predicted when you saw it. The first case was like, we know exactly how this is going to unfold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, textbook.
Right, it was textbook, and it was, I think that first day or two already people were calling and wanting to interview, because measles was eliminated in the United States. And so to have even one case of measles is an emergency, and because of, as Joe mentioned, 9 out of 10 people who are not immune to it but are exposed to it are going to get measles. And many of those kids are going to get hospitalized, and they were. For us, we had 22 kids get hospitalized with pneumonia, dehydration. Thankfully this time nobody in the ICU, but in 2011 we had a child in the ICU on a ventilator for 15 days.
Wow.
who was only alive now because of our ICU team that kept him alive. So we have seen children die of measles in this hospital. We know how dangerous measles can be, and we know how unbelievably contagious it is. And so that's why what our immunization rates at this school, at this daycare, in this city, and our state is really, those are sort of some of the critical questions. And we knew the Somali population had a dangerously low immunization rate, and when it got into that community, we knew that it was going to spread really fast.
Now, how did that happen? How did the Somali community around here all of a sudden have plummeting vaccination rates?
Well, they actually started off when the Somali refugee and immigrant population first came to the United States and Minnesota, late 80s, early 90s. They had one of the higher, actually, community level immunization rates in the upper 90s, mid and upper 90s. And I think something changed in the community, and they had some new diagnoses. I think they saw autism in their community that they hadn't seen before, and they started asking the question, why? Why are we suffering this disease?
Sure.
And I think one of the communications that they came up with was that there wasn't a really good answer. Science hasn't come up with the answer as far as what causes autism. And so they weren't getting the answer that they wanted from scientists, medical doctors, and clinicians. And so they started looking outside of that. And in comes a English doctor, former doctor, Mr. Wakefield, to say, here's what caused it. It's this vaccine, and your kids have it because of this vaccine. And so I think the Somali community, we have Somali liaisons that have been instrumental in making sure that we could help prevent additional cases in this current outbreak. And they kind of relayed to us the communication that, correct me if I'm wrong, in Somalia, families had family members die, like of measles, and they know the disease, they know it's terrible, and it impacts them on a regular basis. In the United States, they don't see measles occurring, so it's not as big a concern here. But in Somalia, they've never seen autism before, whereas in the United States, suddenly autism is happening all over. So, we're not worried about measles here because we don't have it, and we're worried about autism. And if the MMR vaccine is causing autism, from what they were told, well, let's skip that vaccine because we don't want this disease. We don't have this neurologic problems. And it's in a sick sense, it's kind of a logical progression. It's a logical analysis of it. The problem is that the foundation or the basis for their understanding and reasoning for it is based on bad information.
Right, and I would just add that I think it was this misunderstanding that autism doesn't exist in Somalia. And in fact, there is the Center for Autism in Mogadishu. Autism does exist in Somalia. The trouble is that the word translation is just sort of one big bucket term that includes autism, schizophrenia, manic depression, attention deficit disorder, behavior problems. It's sort of one big term. And so then when we are using a specific term, autism, they're like, well, we don't really know that. Well, it's the term that they didn't know. It wasn't that they hadn't seen autism. And Somali parents who have children with autism will tell you that there's autism in Somalia, there's autism in the United States. And the fact that was, I think, the thing that some of the anti-vaccine groups here in Minnesota seized upon and took advantage of their vulnerability. And then with Wakefield coming here and having private, separate meetings, talking to Somali leaders and saying, don't have your people immunized with MMR. They are the leaders. They are the voice, the opinion guides to that community. They went back, told their communities that in over a decade, from that mid-90s% down to 42%, you could just see the impact. And the other thing is, as we look case by case at all these kids, we would open up their immunization records. You could see the older kids fully vaccinated, 2 MMRs, good to go. The kids around the time that these meetings were happening may have had 1 already. They had their first, but they didn't get their second. And these kids who got disease, who got measles, had 0 MMRs. Most of them were completely unvaccinated. And you can almost see the history in their immunization records. And every other immunization was there and done on time. It was just MMR plucked out.
Yeah. Now, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that and guess that when these vaccination rates dropped, the autism rate didn't drop with it.
Well, we don't have any evidence
Okay.
of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there are definitely some studies, the University of Minnesota study that got cited that that basically looked at Hennepin County, kids, and actually there was some concern, like, well, why are all of a sudden, we do see so many more Somali kids getting services for autism? Well, part of it is, as many moms have told me, that if your child doesn't look at you or doesn't speak to you or is not having normal developmental milestones, this is what Allah has given you, and so this is your life to lead and your life to live, and you are not going to run in for services. You're not going to say that there's something terrible happening here. You just know this is what has been given to you. And so sometimes, so you'll go to your well child check and the clinician would say, is your child talking? Are they rolling over? Are they looking at you? Are they speaking, cooing? You just say yes, and so they may not even have the kind of concerns raised from parents. So then where does it get picked up? When the kindergarten teacher goes, whoa, this child is kind of behind on speech and on language and looking and social interaction. There's something. So the picking up in kindergarten was higher than other cultural groups.
Right.
And it's because so many early intervention, as we know, for autism makes a world of difference. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't had any of these milestone problems attended to until you're 5 or 6 years old, you have a lot of catching up to do. Right. But when that science was done by the U of M, they did not find any difference in Hennepin County and Minneapolis between Somali children degrees of autism and other children. The one thing they did find was that there was a slight increase in intellectual disability in those Somali children who had autism, and there's lots of variables there. So you're being administered a test by an interpreter who you just met.
Right.
They're asking you English words or medical terms that you've never heard before.
Right.
And so even just the testing itself to try to, is not that culturally specific.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of issues, and there will be ongoing research with this, but I would say in general, no, we're not seeing this huge increase in autism now that we've had a 325% increase in our vaccine rate in the last 4 months.
Once people realize, oh wait, measles is a big deal and we should actually probably vaccinate our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. So in last year around the same time, April to July, we gave maybe 2,500 MMRs. This year, after people realized measles is scary, we were told fraudulent misinformation. We got to get our kids in and get vaccinated. The imams had a change of heart. Outbreaks change people's minds.
Yeah.
And people were now afraid of a disease that they know. Like, my sister died of measles in Somalia. My nephew, I saw him die. I had it. I remember it was terrible. I talked to almost all of the moms of these kids with measles, and they know how dangerous measles is. The change of heart increased our immunization rates from 2,500 for our clinics up to 8,500 in the same time period.
Wow.
So
That was, I believe, the same sort of thing that happened with the Taliban and the polio vaccine, where they were, spreading, Western conspiracy theories that the polio vaccine was going to do harm to them. And then there were polio outbreaks, and they're like, oh, wait,
yeah,
maybe that's not. Maybe we should go back.
right, exactly.
And so that's good to hear that's happening. It's sad that it has to get to that point
Right,
for people to realize.
right.
And that's the frustrating thing to me with the vaccine argument and the back and forth, is that it is kind of self-correcting. At some point, you're just going to have these diseases come back and everybody's going to be like, oh, wait, maybe that was a bad plan. But I told you so over dead kids isn't very satisfying, you know.
Right.
So it's best to stop it early, right?
It's kind of a cliche that, you know, vaccines are kind of a victim of their own success,
Right.
and that you have to see these horrible diseases. And I think, you know, our generation of parents and are raising kids without ever having seen grandparents suffering the disfigurement from polio or the paralysis of that. You're not dealing with having neighbor kids die of various childhood diseases because we were all immunized. We had the benefits of having parents that listened to their doctors and got the vaccines on schedule. The vast majority, I think we've said this, vast majority of parents in the United States support vaccines, listen to their doctors, get the vaccines they're supposed to, by the CDC, ACIP schedule, and everything works out great. And we're all protected. We all get the benefits of that, including the kids that, unfortunately, even if they got vaccinated or can't be vaccinated for other medical problems, remain susceptible. And it's not always about your kid, it's about all the kids in the neighborhood. And it's kind of more that community picture that I think is being lost in recent years and generations. So
Yeah, there's definitely people are contrarian. People are just, you know, if the government is telling me what I need to do, I need to not do that.
Yeah.
You know, and I get that. I was a punk rock kid. I get that rebellion, you know. But there are certain things. I mean, there's certain things you can do your own way. The analogy I always use is, hey man, you can do things your own way. You can decorate your car rainbow if you want, but doing your things your own way doesn't mean you can drive on the wrong side of the road.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right.
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 it's an analogy.
Yeah, you know, that's why, well, this is freedom, this is personal choice.
Right.
You know, and I think, you know, who's going to argue with freedom? Freedom is a wonderful thing.
Right.
You know, we as Americans don't even know how wonderful it is sometimes.
Right.
But there are limits to our freedoms. You can't run in a movie theater and yell fire and cause pandemonium. You can't just say, I don't really like red lights, I'm going to keep going.
Right.
You know, I'm going to drive through that intersection because I'm important and I'm in a hurry and I don't really like red lights.
Right.
There are things that we have to do as members of this society and as citizens together that we have to do to protect each other, and stopping at red lights and getting our immunizations are what I protect myself and my family, and then I'm also protecting you and your family.
That's a good point I wanted to bring up, because one of the big anti-vax claims is that doctors and medical professionals who push vaccines know better and don't actually vaccinate their own kids.
Oh,
No.
It could not be farther. That is
Yeah.
laughable. They couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. And the other one is that the one that I heard Polly Tommy from the Vax team specifically say was that doctors know that vaccines are poison, and that's why they do it, because poisoned kids are more profitable. Because you can actually, you know, you have some unvaccinated kids are way too healthy to be profitable, so that's why they kick them out of their office.
Yeah. So I think this is an important point, because you do hear this over and over again that we are shills and we are making
Right.
money off of this. And so here's the truth. The truth is, if we were going to make money off of measles, we would not vaccinate anybody. We would have everybody sick. We would have them come in the hospital. We would be able to, you know, bill for an intensive care, $1,000 a day intensive care stay.
Right.
You know, so that child was in the hospital for 15 days in the ICU because of measles. That is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were trying to make money off of this, we would say nobody vaccinated.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if we were trying to make money off of giving MMRs, like there are two. They are $20 a piece.
Right.
It is $40. And so if we were going to be shills for big pharma, MMR would be the last thing that we would pick, because you're not making any money off of it. $40 is what you're gonna get from that.
Right, and if you, or to flip that around a little bit, if you were going to try to make money off it, you would just adjust the schedule and say, oh, you need one every 6 months.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously,
Right.
that's not the case.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, we would have a vaccine for cholera that everybody had to have. You know, we don't have to have one because we've got clean water.
Right.
But, you know, they would put it on the schedule just to, you know, pad the profits. But
Right.
you don't see that.
The argument against that actually just happened. The HPV vaccine, for example, the human papillomavirus vaccine that prevents cervical cancer and other cancers along with it, was originally designed as a 3-dose schedule. You had to have it 3 doses spaced apart, and you know, with additional studies, it showed that, you know, if you get it younger, if you have it before you turn 15, you start getting the shots before you turn 15, you only need 2 doses. So you take away one of the doses, the doctor doesn't get the clinic visit, the company doesn't get to sell an additional vaccine.
Right.
I mean, the argument is kind of undercut by the reality that we're living in.
Well, yeah, and you could say the same with the smallpox vaccine. I mean,
Yeah.
A successful vaccine is one that becomes obsolete. Yeah, it's sooner or later.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and so, someday my grandkids won't need a polio vaccine
Right,
because it did its job.
right, and we are on that path to get to that point.
Go ahead.
I think if we were, the whole collusion of all of us clinicians and big pharma and, it would be, and government, CDC, like all these evil entities, if we were going to be colluding, which I think would be impossible with how large those entities are, we would collude over something that was a pill that you had to take every day or 4 times a day for the rest of your life. That would be an ongoing moneymaker.
The scam would look a lot different.
It would look a lot different.
Yeah.
I mean, vaccines are like, especially measles, mumps, rubella. It is a live vaccine. It's a biologic. It's a virus. You have to grow it and nurture it and get it to stay viable. And then you have to, replicate it and make it and purify it, 22 different steps to purify it, get it into the vials, get it out to all of us, and make sure that the temperature doesn't change. Make sure that we're storing it safely and giving it properly, the right injection, angle and things like that. There are so many ways that it could potentially have a problem that would be the last thing that most people, if you're going to make money off something, it's so fussy. A live vaccine would not be your big pharma dream.
Yeah. Well, it kind of undercuts the idea that these vaccines don't do anything. That's another big anti-vax claim, is that, oh no, these diseases went away on their own, and these vaccines don't do anything. Well, then why even put any ingredients in them?
Wait,
why?
but that argument actually is proven false by what the anti-vaccine community has done. That because you have all these kids that are unvaccinated, they're getting these diseases we haven't seen in a generation. We haven't seen for many years. They're making their own control group with unvaccinated kids, and they're proving that Patsy said,
right.
The vaccinated kids, the older siblings, didn't get measles. The younger unvaccinated kids did.
That's
the
shedding,
data is
And they're in the same house.
Literally, they'll blame it on the vaccine.
Right, and shedding is
Absolute
not
is.
even a concept that we're talking about with this this vaccine and virus. And so
Yeah.
Minnesota's situation is also a good case in point of how great vaccines are, how well they work. So if you say 79 cases, and for us in public health that know the potential for 79, for each one person who's infected, if you had a non-immune community, you would have another 20. It gets exponential really quickly. But why did we stay at 79? Because each one of those, when they went to go infect their other potential 20, they were already vaccinated. So the community immunity, which they also think herd immunity is not real, it is so powerful to have a protected society that the virus seeks and finds the unimmunized, and that's who gets infected. But if you have a community like right now, you increase your immunization rates, the virus is trying to find another subject to infect, and the immunity is so high that it just peters out. And so 8,200 individuals were tracked down by each of these 79 that potentially exposed them, and given preventive immune globulin, given a preventive MMR, or they had already had their 2 MMRs, so we're already immune. We were like, yay. And when that happens, and thankfully most of those 8,200 people, when we followed up with them, public health, our clinics, etc., they had a record of 2 MMRs. Then we don't have to do anything.
Right.
So it has made the case itself right here in Minnesota.
Yeah, for people who will listen to that, to facts.
But the other argument that I don't think the anti-vaccine community talks about is what happens if you don't vaccinate and you're exposed and you refuse to get the post-exposure prophylaxis or the MMR dose or the IMIG, whatever is being offered or being recommended. It's not like you get to go off scot-free and be on your merry way. No, public health has a very strong interest in preventing additional cases from showing up. If you are exposed to measles and you do not have any proof of immunity, you don't get just to go off and keep going to school, keep going to work. You have to be on what they call, I guess, social isolation or social exclusion. It's a nice way of saying quarantine without the law. But if we had a family that refused, or individuals that refused to abide by the request of public health, they could go to a judge and likely get the order to place them under like sheriff guard outside their door, keeping them in their house under quarantine.
Yeah.
And I really hope that never happens, because the optics of that are terrible.
Right.
It really sends a message that, you know, it will almost be like a police state mentality when it doesn't need to be that way. We're just trying to keep everyone safe and healthy and prevent kids from dying. And you present a real risk. I mean, everybody was so worked up about these patients coming back with Ebola. Ebola, for every one case, I think the statistics were, you said 20 cases for every measles case. Ebola, nobody has a vaccine against that. Everyone's susceptible to Ebola. That has a level of 2. You get 2 cases. It's an order of magnitude less,
Yeah.
and people freaked out about it. If you're freaked out about Ebola, you should be really freaked out about measles.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate I am freaked out about measles. I'm freaked out about all these things, and that's why I'm trekking along.
So,
We appreciate-
so tell us about your journey. What have been your biggest lessons?
So, I've been following the Vax bus around, and we're kind of hit and miss on civility, but it's really a lot of true believers that are showing up. Unfortunately, in my eyes, they're not setting up at a farmer's market and just luring people in off the streets. You know what I mean? They're setting up at a location, and the people who are coming to them are already wearing Vaxxed shirts.
Wow.
And are just just kind of scary in its own, but it's not like it's an outreach as such as it is a gathering of already like-minded people.
Okay.
What they do is they will get on the bus and they will tell their vaccine injury stories, which are rarely true or even plausible. And now the new one is they're filming a sequel where they're trying to do their own vaxxed versus unvaxxed comparison. But really what it is are parents that are coming in saying, I vaxxed my first child, turned out they had autism, I'm going to connect those two events, and so my next child is not vaccinated. They don't have autism, see, I was right. And so then it's really kind of horrifying. They bring the children onto this bus and they say, here's my perfect kid and here's my damaged kid. And it's like, how can you do that to your kids? Can you imagine growing up like that with an identity of being the damaged one of the family?
No.
I mean, it's really bad. And so that's why, I mean, sometimes when I go out there, I'm like, man, am I doing the right thing protesting? Am I, causing grief to, like, because I get into situations where some parent is on there talking about they lost their child and they firmly in their heart believe that it was vaccines. And I'm there protesting and all of a sudden I'm the bad guy because I'm, making their grief worse. And I don't want that at all.
Right.
But the end result is their video is going to go on the internet and scare other parents away from vaccinating their kids.
Right.
So what do you do?
Right.
It's very difficult.
Right. And
We're
so,
low battery.
Okay.
So.
All right. Go ahead.
so I mean, it's sort of like, what do you do? Do you haul out the old videos of the iron lungs of polio? Do you get people like me who have taken care of children who end up dying from vaccine preventable diseases, from Haemophilus? That you have to carry a baby to the morgue because they died of this disease? That is something I'll never forget. How do you say, there are another side to this? If we don't vaccinate, these diseases will come back.
Yeah, and I hope we can find the answer. I'm trying to find the answer. You guys are trying to find the answer. It's difficult. And the saddest thing is that every once in a while you have a case where somebody doesn't vaccinate their kid purposefully. Something tragic happens. They themselves, the light bulb clicks, oh, I made a horrible mistake.
Right.
And the anti-vaxxers turn on them like a traitor. Like they've sold out the movement,
Right,
and
right.
by switching sides. Oh, they were never anti-vaccine in the first place, or whatever. No, they were anti-vaccine. They bought into your lies. Now they've got a kid
The
who's
consequences
the
of it.
consequences.
Well, and I talk to those families who, when their child gets admitted in our ICU with a terrible meningitis that was vaccine preventable, I go talk to them, and they don't want to tell their story. They feel terrible.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's because
They're not going to come up and say, I was a bad parent.
This is my
I
fault."
skipped this, and I wish I hadn't. They universally say, I wish I had not skipped that. Had I known this disease was this bad, I never would have declined.
I had meningitis. It was the most horrifying experience of my life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well,
I think the ownership is also a key point that's taken there, that clinicians take responsibility for the medications and recommendations they provide. I mean, they could go to court for what's given. And if you look at the bottom of what's the Minnesota vaccine page, I can't remember the Vaccine Safety Council, where they call it. At the bottom they say, Minnesota Vaccine Safety Council takes no responsibility for any
Yeah, of course
actions
they do.
taken from guidance and recommendations based on here. So it's basically washing their hands. Say, do what we, these vaccines cause problems, but don't really listen to us or do anything based on it because we don't want to get sued.
Yeah, I'm going to give you, I'm preaching informed choice. I'm going to give you a bunch of misinformation, and then when you use that to make your choice, it's not my fault. You made your choice.
That's right.
And it's
Yeah,
it's baloney.
it's abusive to parents. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's a sad note to end on, but I'm going to let you guys get back to your real jobs.
All right, really nice to meet you.
It was very good to meet you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you so much.
Thanks so much for all
Thank
your
you.
efforts. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
Drive safe.
Thank you. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.